The wisdom of Gore 8. Cunning, improvisation, and Tuchuks. All warfare is deception. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Sun Tzu may not have ever visited Gore, but some Tuchuk respects must have channeled his work. The word deception is synonymous with the word Tuchuk. Deception, ingenuity, and cunning are the cardinal values of the Tuchuk people, and by proxy, Norman is extolling them for men in general. It is not enough in Norman's view for a man to be physically powerful. He must have the expertise in his trade and the wisdom to apply his might to its best effect. A man may have might, but it's how he applies it that determines his success or failure. A weaker wrestler, for instance, can often prevail against a stronger one, so long as the weaker wrestler has determination and cunning to outperform his opponent. And we see this repeatedly with the Tuchuks and the nomads of Gore. Norman's wagon peoples are inspired not only by the Mongols, but by many other nomadic steppe people. We can see traces of the Sarmatians and Huns in their culture. Some commentators have compared them to the Lakota, as the wagon peoples are dependent upon a herd, the Bosque. But in later novels, Norman has different nations upon Gore. We'll talk about them later. They're basically stand-ins for Native American, or if you prefer the term, First Nations peoples. It is good to be clever, but not to show it. French Proverbs. The first example of Tuchuk duplicity that we witness is when Tarl Cabot meets the Tuchuks. He is unaware that Kai Taichuk, the man he has been introduced to as the leader of the Tuchuks, is in fact a body double. Kutai Tuchik, I mispronounced his name the first time, it's Kutai Tuchik, is an elder Tuchuk who can no longer fight or ride as well as Tuchuks expect. In fact, when we see him, he's often shown as gnawing on candle leaves, a kind of narcotic. And as he is no longer useful in the field, he has volunteered to pretend to be the leader so that any attempt to assassinate the actual leader of the Tuchuks will fail. In short, the man has volunteered to die for his people. That's nothing but admirable. Now, this may seem paranoid, but later in the novel, during a raid by Tarnsmen, we will see that this was actually not paranoia, but foresight. When you say one thing, the clever person understands three. Chinese proverb. This playing upon the assumptions of others is seen again in a scene in which a prideful merchant princess, Afris of Turia, is tricked into accepting a slave collar and losing her station and her inheritance. Specifically, Kamchak the Tuchuk has brought a box to her party and states that he brought it as a gift for her. But that now that he has seen her wealth and her grandeur, he is sure she will not want it. It's not worthy of her. There follows some coy banter as she tries to manipulate him, thinking from the size and shape of the box the gift must be some valuable necklace. He has given her a necklace with diamonds on it in the past. And with Kamchak manipulating her in return with deflections so that she will want the gift all the more. When the slave steel clicks about her throat, things get interesting, and she realizes that her main protector is also now the benefactor of her enslavement, as he has now taken possession of what was formerly her possessions and everything she owned. The Tuchuks are also willing to play upon stereotypical, let's call them stereotypical detrimental beliefs that others hold against the Tuchuks, since the Tuchuks are a wandering people. And that's not unlike how many modern people in the urbanized West will look down upon people of less technologically and materially developed nations as somehow being backward or inferior, or even upon their own fellow Western countrymen who choose not to live in the urbanized centers but out in the countryside. Specifically, Kamchak gets himself into a duel and lets the opponent, Kamras I believe is the man's name, believe that Kamchak is not familiar with a sword, but only with Tuchuk weaponry. The Tuchuks do not, as a rule, use swords. Then, during the duel, the wily Tuchuk acts in such a way that it appears he has no skill with a sword, only to win the duel by stellar swordsmanship and expertise, having such trickery in hand that he is able to deflect sunlight into the man's eyes with his blade as well as parry blows, revealing that Kamchak is not only an extremely skilled swordsman, but he learned this from being the finest swordsman in the city of Ar, one of the more urbanized centers upon Gore. Tuchuks live not only by their considerable skill, but by this wily deception. And there's an axiom inside the text that goes, "Of course, you are a Tuchuk," which is mentioned whenever a Tuchuk has a plan, even a loose one, or is up to some trickery. The Tuchuks understand that in the constant Darwinian struggle that is upon Gore, they must be more cunning than their foes, or they will perish. Another example of this cunning, though it is largely seen in battle, is a scene in which the Tuchuks manage to penetrate the walls of Turia. The text reveals us that the Tuchuks have been stalled outside the gates as they attempt to break through the walls, only to be stopped as they possess no siege engines, a thing that was very familiar to the Mongols until they started drafting people to build their siege engines. The Tuchuks depart, appearing to retreat from the battle, and then send a wagon towards the city in the guise of being on a merchant mission, and when the wagon is halfway through the gates, its wheel mysteriously slips. And that's when the Tuchuks attack, because now the wagon's height prevents the Turian gate from dropping to block access, and because its width prevents the gates from closing to prevent access, the Tuchuks have their way in. But it is not just planned cunning that Norman is advocating for men. It is also the ability to improvise solutions. Improvisation is the recurrent theme in this story. Charles' Tuchuk companions are far more willing to wing it than he is. One example is that of Harold, perhaps my favorite character of the entire novel, who, accompanying Tarl Cabot into the city of Turia, proceeds to attempt a rescue, with no plan in mind at all, other than don't get caught. Along the way, he will bluff past guards, maximize events as they occur, and executes what has to be the most chaotic rescue I have ever read, and I laughed the entire time I read these passages. Harold is an experience. You need to read this book, if not for just Harold. We see improvisation again with Tarl as he is trapped in a pool with a monster. The monster has slain many people before Tarl has been captured. It's called the Yellow Pool, and it has a property that makes the gel-like liquid that it is composed of trap and thicken around a victim to prevent movement, to then be slowly digested. I should point out this novel also predates a certain Sarlacc monster. Copyright infringement. Tarl's solution is not to attempt to escape, nor to reach up in vain for the vines that hang above, as others have tried and failed, nor to try to struggle towards the edge of the pool, which others have tried and failed. Instead, he moves into the center of the pool with the weapon he's been given, supposedly to commit suicide, deducing that that's where the beast's organs are, and he attacks it, causing it to flee from his presence. This flexibility of mind, that which is required for improvisation, is advocated in both the Tuchuks and in Tarl, so we can assume that Norman is advocating it for humanity's men in general. Direct action against the source of a problem is also subtly shown. While Harold is attempting to rescue women, one of them, a Tuchuk girl by the name of Harina, she happens to find Harold very ugly, refuses to be rescued. Harold asks her how she will stop him, and she replies that she will not allow herself to be captured. When Harold asks her how she will prevent that, she tells Harold, paraphrasing, that she will use a simple plan of screaming. Harold admits that this is a good plan, and then he dares her to enact it. And when she tries out of defiance, he wads a wad of silk into her mouth, jamming it deep so she can't make any sound, and then gags her and carries her out of the complex. A good lawyer knows the law. A clever one knows the judge. American Proverbs. But perhaps the final bit of deception, that of the egg of the priest kings, which Charles has been sent to find, is broken on a stone floor in front of him, causing him to weep and be distressed for the loss of the priest kings, as this egg was the last chance they had to generate new life. The egg is revealed to be a mock-up painted gold, perhaps a Thalarian egg, and the true egg has been used all the while as a seat upon which the false Tuchuk leader was sitting when he took audiences. This is perhaps the ultimate trick, combining various aspects of the story, playing on people's expectations, playing on their preconceptions, outright deception, subtlety, misdirection. It reveals that the Tuchuks will not only use all of a person's preconceptions against them, but they will test people by their character. If you will remember when Tarl first approaches, there is a duel with various writers, and it is only because Tarl was consistent with his statement that he did not wish to harm any of them and he came in peace, willing to risk injury and use non-lethal force, that he was allowed to join the camp. And later, from his deeds throughout the novel, the proof of his character, which has been constantly tested, he is finally considered to be to be an ally and then finally a member of the Tuchuk tribe. They even name a historical event of the year after him, their highest honor. All throughout the novels, we see Tarl constantly getting the highest honors of a people for acting in the vein of a hero. There are some other statements that are made in this novel about the character of men and women, but I think I'm going to wait until we get to Slave Girl of Gore to talk about them, because I want you to have a good sense of all the subtle philosophical topics that are brought up in the novels before we get to what typically is the baggage of the series, as I call it. I really, really enjoyed Nomads. It is perhaps my favorite of the novels so far as I am rereading them. And as I record this, I've just finished rereading Assassin of Gore, which I'd actually read before I read books 3 and 4. And I read them slightly out of order originally. And there's many things in Assassin that are going to require multiple videos. Of the first 5 books, Assassin is actually the one that has the most trying moral questions packed into the novel. It is only a little bit longer than the first novel, but it's so dense when you start to examine it and pick it apart. We'll probably end up doing about 4 or 5 videos just on Assassin. I do hope you're enjoying the series, and I hope you tune in for the next one, where we're going to talk about what is the just use of capital punishment.